Hopefully you're seeing my screen. Are you?
Yeah, sorry, we were muted. We can see you.
All right, all right. Sorry, this is my first time in this setup. So, all right, cool. So, hey everyone, thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation, and sorry if I joined a little bit late. I was going through all the setup and signing up. This is very new to me, so sorry for that. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Ricardo Alves. I'm a product manager here at OutSystems, responsible for the whole application development area, which pretty much are the core functional capabilities that allow you to create applications in OutSystems, and also for the data integration product area, which is where Data Fabric, where Data Fabric is a part of. I've been at OutSystems for quite some time now, so I believe for 11, 12 years or so. So I know a thing or two about OutSystems. You have here my contacts if you want to contact me by email or LinkedIn. You're always free to drop me an email or send me a LinkedIn message. So without further ado, let's go over Data Fabric. So I wanted to go over what Data Fabric is, what challenges does it address, and finish by showing you how you can leverage Data Fabric in your OutSystems applications, and also show you some brand new capabilities that we released, I believe last week or early last week or early this week. I know I don't fully remember, but let's jump right into it. So I just wanted to give you first an overview of the data landscape that we currently have. So a recent survey concluded that companies are drawing data from 400 different data sources. So this means that data is spreading all over the place. Every day there's a new SaaS tool with which you can integrate with and fetch data. All companies, or the majority of the companies, have some sort of ERP or CRM in place to manage their orders, their customers, and you also have many other different data sources. And this number was just on average. So this number can go as high as 1,000 different data sources that a company has. Now, as you can imagine, making use of this data is a really hard challenge. And what happens today is that companies don't have enough either compute power or manpower to understand exactly what are these data sources, what are the data. And this leads to a phenomenon that is called data decay, which is because companies don't have enough manpower to handle the data, the data starts losing its integrity and purpose. So you can have many different data sources with unstructured data, and you can't really connect to what the data is. So you can't make sense of what the data is, and the data will eventually lose its meaning that you're fetching data from, you're having different data sources, but at the end of the day, you can't use that data to make informed decisions or to have the data presented to your end users. Now, if you now start talking about integrating data from different data sources, this problem is going to be even bigger. So a very simple example, imagine that you have a customer 360 example, kind of application for your sales teams, where you're probably fetching data from your Salesforce, from your SAP account, from your SQL Server database. You need to combine all of this data to have them make sense. And you know what I'm going with this, right? This is a really tough challenge, not just because of the data integration, but also because of the non-functional requirements. You want your application to be performant, you want your application to be secure, and so on and so forth. So the way that this can be solved is through a data fabric solution. I have here two definitions, but I really don't want to bother you to death with these formal definitions by analysts like Gartner and Forrester. I just wanted to give you a glimpse of what we understand with as what data fabric is and what it entails. So at the end of the day, the data fabric solution can be seen as a set of systems that provide a unified view of your data, regardless of where the data resides. And it does this in real-time fashion. So this means that ideally you have a data layer that abstracts all of the complexity to integrate with all of these different data sources, and you can have access in real time to this data and make use of it and present it to your end users, and to allow you to be able to make informed decisions about your product. So as we've been discussing up until now, there are some challenges that we would like to solve by having this data fabric solution. So the first one is that, and the ultimate goal with this whole data fabric approach is that we want you to be able to take as full advantage as possible of your enterprise data. So we want to make data available for your applications. And we want to do this while keeping the NFRs and security, meaning that we want to be able that all these integrations are secure, and that you keep your governance model on top of all of these data sources. On top of this, we want to make sure that your application keeps its performance, and ultimately we want to simplify the whole integration experience. So we want you to have an immediate integration experience to a wide variety of data sources. So here is what our data fabric solution provides, and this is what we've launched. If you've seen in late March, we did launch our data fabric solution, and this is what we want to solve with it. So we want to have a consolidation of data sources through a unique virtualization layer. This means that we want to provide a virtualization layer that abstracts all of the complexity of the data sources, meaning that we want to provide a single way for you to handle data regardless of the data source. So it doesn't matter if it's coming from a SQL Server database, a MySQL database, an SAP systems of records, eventually a MongoDB, a non-SQL database, you name it. We will provide this data layer so everything boils down to the same low-code constructs, entities, and attributes. On top of this, we have enhanced controls for data security and governance while keeping the performance of your application. And as we're going to see in a few minutes, we want to have a simplified integration experience to a set of data sources. Now, as per our differentiated approach, or where we believe we really can extract the most value out of a data fabric solution, is that not only do we have a seamless integration experience, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned, and as I will be mentioning throughout this presentation, everything boils down to entities and attributes that you can use like any other entity in your applications, which means that you can use them like any other entity, that you can reuse them across your whole application portfolio. You can mash up the data directly in aggregates. You can create your own data sets, combining data from all of these different data sources. So you can do all of this in a low-code approach. And as like any other low-code element, you're also going to have everything that low-code offers from the get-go, meaning that you'll have access to all of our accelerators, scaffolding, validations, suggestions, the true change, the impact analysis, while promoting applications. So everything that you have that you can do with aggregates, you can do with regular entities and attributes. You can do with data fabric with external data sources. So we covered the whole application development lifecycle, not just the development, but also staging applications, impacting analysis, understanding the impacts of data changes that you might have in your data model. Now, having said this, I want to go over some of the critical capabilities that we provide out of the box. So as I mentioned, we provide this data virtualization layer that allows you to very easily and quickly query your external data sources, mesh up the data, and combine data from different data sources. So this is something that is really a differentiator here. So not only can you have access to your data sources, but you can combine data from different data sources, thus making data more accessible to your applications and your end users. We have security and governance in place, and we also allow you to securely connect to your private resources. So many of you probably have on-prem solutions behind your firewall or within your VPN that you don't want to expose to the outside world. So we provide a secure way for you to connect to your private resources. As we cater for performance, we also have built-in data caching because, like I mentioned, everything boils down to entities and attributes, and like aggregates that you might already have, you can cache them in your applications. All of this with an immediate integration experience by providing a set of pre-built connectors to a set of popular data sources. Now, I mentioned a very small example in one of the first slides where we talked about this 360 kind of application for your sales users. But as you can imagine, you have a wide range of use cases that you can build, from legacy modernization when you want to make use of your legacy data systems, or just migrate them to more modern solutions. You can build a sort of data master data management solution where you have a single source of truth of all your data, a sales management tool where you combine data from your ERPs with your local databases, an e-commerce solution optimization, you name it. There's a whole set of use cases that we've now unblocked with Data Fabric that you can build. I also just wanted to refer back to a couple of announcements we did in March. So in March, we did our product launch where we publicly announced the launch of our Data Fabric solution. And with it, we actually released 3 new integrations to Salesforce, SAP, and Postgres. And earlier this month, we also released data mashup in ODC, meaning that you can now mash up data from different data sources. So you can combine data from different data sources directly in your aggregate. So you don't need to create complex logic to build these solutions, create structures, create iterators, combine the data, append to lists, and so on and so forth. You can do it directly in aggregates, saving time in development, saving time and saving the need to have experts doing this complex data, because you can do it directly in our low-code constructs. So having said this, and because I've been talking too much, let's see this working in a real application. And for that, I would like to show you very quickly an application that we've built so that we can see how we're going to do a couple of use cases. And most likely, I'm not sharing the right thing. So let me just go back here. How do I do this? Stop sharing, start sharing. Maybe it's this one. All right. So I'll assume that unless someone stops me, I'm sharing our order management solution. So this is an order management solution where we're tracking, we have a product catalog, we're tracking our orders, we're tracking our opportunities, we're tracking our accounts. And I want to do a couple of operations here. This information is coming from a SQL Server database, but we also have data coming from Salesforce. So let's access here the accounts, because this is one of the use cases that I want to show you. So here we have the accounts that we currently have, and we have some information. This information is actually coming from a SQL Server database that we kind of did a copy from our Salesforce entities, where we added a couple of other attributes that we didn't have in Salesforce. And as you can see, we have the company, the code, the contact name, the city, and the phone. But actually, I want to add here the country as well. I don't want the city. I'm not very good at geography, so I really need to understand exactly what's the country that we're talking about here. But if I go to my data source, my local account entity doesn't have any information about the country. And for this, let me actually jump into ODC Studio. And I'm sorry for this jumping back and forth. I'm assuming this is a Google Meets. So I'm not really experienced here. I'm more of a Zoom guy. So sorry for this jumping back and forth. All right. So again, until anyone stops me, I'm going to assume that I'm sharing ODC Studio. And if I go here to my data, I just wanted to show you that I have here a local database, but it doesn't have the information about the country, just a country ID, a company name, but I really want the country name. So let's see how we could add a Salesforce integration here in my flow. So for this, and sorry for jumping back and forth. Let me share. I think it's this one. Yes. So let's go to the portal. So this is the ODC portal. For those who don't know the portal, this is where we have an holistic view of our applications in our tenant. We have a lot of configurations that we can do here, from staging operations, monitoring operations, and as you can see here, we have this integration operations where we have this connections section. And here is where we manage all of the integrations with external data systems. So we're going to see here that I already have a couple of them. Actually, I'm just going to reuse this order management Salesforce connection, but I wanted to show you how you could create your connection to an external system. So this is as easy as clicking the create connection button, picking the system that you want to integrate with. So as you can see, we already have a couple of integrations from SQL Server and a couple of flavors. So we have Azure SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, and 3 different flavors of Postgres: on-prem, Postgres, Aurora, and Azure. So as I mentioned, I want to integrate with Salesforce, so I would just pick Salesforce. And now I just needed to provide a set of integration details so that I could be able to connect to the external system. So I'll just provide a connection name, and I can choose the authentication type that I want to have with Salesforce, and I can have a no-auth authentication, and this is pretty much it. Now, once you've created the connection, and so let me go here to an already existing one. Once you've created the connection, you just need to pick the data that you want to work with. So you definitely don't want to expose your whole Salesforce account to your OutSystems applications, but rather you might want to expose just a set of data that you want to work with. In this particular case, I've picked the account and the opportunities entities, and if you click the entity, you're going to have available all the attributes that you want to work with. So again, we really want you to focus on the data that actually makes sense in your application. Having selected the data, you just need to click Save, and that data immediately becomes available for you to use in your OutSystems applications. So let me jump back to ODC Studio. And as I mentioned, once you create the connection and you pick the entities, the data becomes immediately available for you to consume. So if you go to of course, I need to connect. Give me a second here. I'm so happy this is being recorded as well. But this is this is the thing with live demos. So, all right, we're back. So if you go here to the public elements dialog, you'll have access to the connection that we just created. So it was the order management Salesforce, and as you can see, you have the data immediately available for you to consume, like any other entity in OutSystems. So I had already pre-picked the account entity, and as you can see here, we're going to have the connection that we created with the account and the attributes that we've picked. And we have here the shipping country, which is exactly what I wanted. So once we've added this to our application, let's see how we can enhance the screen to have also here the country name. So let me go to the aggregate, and we have here this get account segregate. Now I already have kind of a relation with this account and the Salesforce account. Both of them share the same ID. So honestly, what I just want to do is doing a merge operation between my local account with my Salesforce account. So as you might expect, I'm just going to drag and drop this here, add the join operation. So I want accounts only with the Salesforce account, and I'm going to combine them with this SFID, which is Salesforce ID, is equal to the.
Sorry.
Yes.
This is better. Sorry, Ricardo. Sometimes when you share your screen and you get a pop-up, then we don't see the pop-up.
Oh.
So I don't know if it maybe pops up on another screen with you.
No. I only have the one screen. So let me try to do this. Let me try to do this a different way. And maybe I should have done this.
Yeah, you also have the option to share your whole screen instead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I should have thought about that earlier. All right. Okay, so let me know if you're seeing now the pop-ups.
I'm now seeing the presentation. I'm seeing your
Come on. Wait, I can do this. Wait. Oh, all right. Now it's just a matter of me understanding how to read English. All right, entire screen. Well, it should be self-explanatory. All right, you can now see the dialogue. Yes. This is why I come to this user group, so that I can learn how to work properly with these tools. All right. So yeah, okay. So let me go over again what very quickly. So once the data is available, you can add them by going to the public element screen, and now you can see the dialogue. You can filter by the name of the connection that you created. So Salesforce, it's this order management Salesforce, and you have here the entities, like any other entities that you have, that you can just pick and add them to your application. All right, so now we came back to this aggregate. I wanted to do a join operation, and what I was setting up was just this condition where I'm just saying that my account Salesforce ID is equal to the Salesforce account ID. And because, as I mentioned, and I'll probably say this one or two more times, because this works like any other entity in OutSystems, you have access to real-time data preview. You can do filters, you can do sorts, you can have test values, you can even create calculated attributes. So again, everything that you're already used to doing with any other entity and attribute. So let me just publish this application so that we can see it working live. So hopefully, if I now do this, you can see you're now seeing the order management application, right? I'll assume so.
Yes.
Yay! All right. So yeah, I should have clicked the 1CP button a little bit earlier, because now I'm just buying some time until we finish doing the 1CP. It's all good. But yeah, so the idea is once we finish the publishing, we'll have access to this application. Oh, well, I was trying to see if you were paying attention, but with all of these distractions, we forgot to add here the expression. So let's go to the aggregate here. Let's go to the Salesforce account, and let's drag and drop the shipping country here, and this will create not what I was expecting. So let's do another way around. So let's drag and drop the expression. And now let's go here to the aggregate and say that we want to have the shipping country. Yay! All right. And now we're going to publish again. All right, so just recapping what we did. We saw how we could create a connection. We saw that after creating a connection, we can pick the data that we want to work with. And by the way, we're kind of doing a two-way governance model here. So on the one hand, we're inheriting the governance model that you have for the user that you've set up in the connection. So this means that we only have access to whatever that logged user has access to. In here, in your aggregates, you can go a level further, and you can, in your aggregates, again, fine-tune it according to the role of the logged user as well. So you have these two options to fine-tune your roles and permissions. All right, so let's go back here, and hopefully we already have data coming from our local database and a mashup of the local database with Salesforce. So we already have the country here. And let me just go a couple of pages ahead, because you might think that, okay, Ricardo, everything is United States, so you're kind of cheating. But hopefully in this third page, I'm not. All right. So this is literally data coming from external data sources combined with the local database. Now, before I wrap up my presentation, I just wanted to also highlight another thing here. So we've been talking about reading operations from external entities. But if we go back to ODC Studio, and if you paid attention here, we have here the data coming from the external data sources, and the data also comes with your traditional CRUD operations. So you can create, update, read, and delete data from the external data sources. So here, for instance, if I go to the details of this 3N company, and now we are actually fetching data from Salesforce directly, I can see that we don't have a fax number here. So let's actually change this. And let me actually open this as well. This is the Salesforce account that we're using. So let's see. If you go here to the details, you can see that we don't have a fax number. I know that this is in Portuguese, but come on, fax number is the same in Portugal, in pretty much everywhere. So as we can see, fax number isn't set here. So let's go back here. Let's go to the edit part, and let's just add a fax number here. So one, and where's the save button? And save. And this will actually record the thing in Salesforce. And up in here we go. And the way that this was done, as you might expect, is when we save the account, we're calling directly the entity action, create or update Salesforce account. And this will immediately save the data back in the system that we're integrating with. All right, and I believe this covers the demo that I wanted to show you. I believe we're still on track with time, so I'm open to questions.
Yes, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you, Ricardo. This is the first time for us as well doing a hybrid event, so we're figuring this out together.
I was kind of hoping I would get a plane ticket to go there, but I mean, next time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we have some questions in the Q&A from the people that joined online, so I'll ask the first one from there, and then we'll see if someone here has a question and work our way through it. So the first question was from Philippa. She had two questions, actually. The first one was, what role does data governance play in maintaining data integrity within low-code data fabric?
Yeah, so one of the things here is that we're not storing any data on OutSystems side. So we are fetching the data in real time from your external data sources. You can create your own data in OutSystems, and then you'll need to update it constantly. But we're not storing anything on our side. So the data still resides on your external system. So that's where the data will live. We're just accessing in real time.
Cool. Okay. And then I'll move on to our second question. And that was, how can we leverage AI to enhance insights derived from data fabric? Pretty big question.
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty big answer as well. But so that's something that we're kind of exploring currently on how we can optimize it in OutSystems. There's no way that we can there's no way that we can do it automatically still. So we did launch AI agent builder back in March as well. It's still not connected with Data Fabric, and that's something that we're exploring as we speak. So right now we don't have an automated way for doing that, but it's definitely something that we're exploring and that we want to have more news soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you for answering the questions and Felipa for asking them. Does anyone here have a question for Ricardo? Sylvia.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we have the microphone on this camera, so if you speak.
I'm just wondering, the connectors you're showing are just ready-made connectors, but is it always also possible to create your own connector, for example, via the REST service or something like that, and use that in Data Fabric?
So let me just see if I got the question right. So you're asking if you can create your own connections, your own connector to your own data source. Yeah. So right now, the short answer is no. So this is something that we're also exploring, how we can open up our connections model so that you can build your own integration with your own system. So right now we can do it. You still need to rely, if you want to do your own integration, you still need to rely on REST APIs or custom code to do it. But right now there's no way that you can create your own connector, package it, and have it available as an integration within Data Fabric. And by the way, any particular system that you were thinking about, or it was just out of curiosity?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, because it would be so handy.
Yeah. Our plan is to keep increasing the connections that we have available. So we do still have in the short term extending our integrations to SAP BAPIs, to MySQL, and to DB2. These are the ones that we are planning to address on the short term. More will most likely come in the near future, depending on customer need and whether it fits or not in our vision. So do keep the feedback coming as well, so that we can prioritize accordingly. But thank you for the question.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to do one online and one in person, but I've seen you. There was another question asking if there are any limitations of getting external resources, or how many entities or anything there are. Any limitations? No limitation.
No, there are no limitations except when you use data mashups. So for data mashups, we do have some limits. I don't know them by heart, but you can check up online in our documentation. By the way, these limits are not set in stone, so we're still fine-tuning the solution. We may increase the limits, but they are so far we believe they are high enough so that you can safely do your mashups and your integrations, but direct integrations don't have any sort of limits.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So do you also have advanced query? And if you do, how do you deal with the differences in database backends, like executing sort procedure or executing like functions back?
Yeah. So currently, no, we don't have advanced SQL nodes. That's something that we're exploring on having. So while we don't have it, you can resort to custom code. There might be a little bit of an overhead of building a custom code solution to integrate with to run a stored procedure or something similar. But we are exploring having advanced SQL nodes. Most likely, we still don't know the direction we want to have. Either we want to create a common grammar SQL to every single one of our data sources, or we just rely on the SQL language that is provided by the database engine, and you create directly using that grammar. So that's something that we're exploring. I don't have an answer as to exactly how we're going to build this, but what I can share right now is this is something that we're currently exploring. So we do want to have this available.
Thank you.
Cool. And then one online question was, how are the entities from an external source distinguished in the dependencies from the others exposed from other applications?
They aren't. That's the beauty of it. Why would you want to have a difference between external databases and external entities and local entities? That was literally the purpose of Data Fabric, to have this virtualization layer where everything would be the same. So actually, I want to ask this back. So why do you find the need to have this highlighted, to have this differentiated? I don't know who asked the question, whether it was online or.
It was Helena Lamero. Sorry for pronouncing it wrong, but you can use the chat to answer the question Ricardo asked you, or we can move on to the next question, and then if she gets back to you on the chat, we'll
or you can drop me an email. That's fine.
That also works. Cool. Anyone here got any questions? Yes.
I was wondering, while doing the mashup, whether you rely on local caching within OutSystems.
Yeah. So the data caching is let me. I can actually show you this. So let me share the screen again. Now that I know how to share the screen, let me share the screen again. So, like any other aggregate that you have on the server side. So, for instance, let's do an aggregate here. You have these caching minutes property. So either you go directly to an external data source, or you combine data in the aggregates. You can always specify these caching minutes. So this is how we handle data caching.
It's not what I meant, but
oh, sorry.
No, it's just maybe I was not clear enough. Suppose you have an internal entity, so one in the local database, and you have a, I don't know, a MongoDB outside, and you want to mesh up the information between those two data sources. In order to do the mashup, is the data from the MongoDB being first brought into OutSystems, into a temporary table or something, to do then the mashup?
Yeah, so we do have what we call our query engine that is part of our technical solution, and this is where we perform all of these operations. So we bring the data in memory and we perform this data mashup. We do have a couple of optimization strategies, and we try to optimize the query so as not to blow up the performance, the memory. But yeah, it's part of our technical solution that we bring the data and then we mesh it up on our side.
Okay, thank
you. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, yeah, sure.
You see, adding an entity and an attribute, is there also an impact analysis when you remove attributes or entities?
Yeah, I need someone to. I needed to speak a little bit louder, please. I didn't get the answer.
Okay.
The question. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, sorry. Or you can come closer to the microphone. Maybe that's easier.
You've seen adding an entity or attribute. Is there also an impact analysis for removing entities and attributes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you remove in your ODC application, if you remove an entity or an attribute, we'll have impact analysis directly in the application. But you're just removing removing the entity from your application. So you're never deleting anything on your external data source. So you'll have immediate impact analysis like any other entity that you're using. So imagine you have a form that you're leveraging data from an entity. If you delete the entity, of course, you're going to have errors. So if you do this with external entities, the same. Now, if you remove data from the external data source directly, so you remove an attribute, you delete an entity, you have a section in the portal where you're configuring the integration with the external system, where you can refresh your data schema, and that will do a validation of your current data schema and your external data schema, and it will tell you of the impacts that this is going to have in your application. So if you delete if you delete a table from your external data source and you refresh the entities in the portal, you're going to have a pop-up saying that you're moving this, you will have errors in these applications. And when you open the applications again, you will have the errors in the to change. So yeah, we do have information about impact analysis when you change the data schema as well.
Cool. Okay, then as Ricardo already said, if you have any questions or if you come home tonight and you do come up with a question, you can always send him an email. And for now, I just want to thank you, Ricardo, and we're going to move on to Sezen with the ODC architecture presentation.
All right, thank you for having me.
I will turn around the camera because Sezen is here and the people at home want to see Sezen present. Your time of fame is over.
That was the purpose.
I'm going to occasionally switch over while on this laptop. So I'm going to be interacting with this laptop on this little table. It's not going to go well. If it falls, I'm counting on the gentleman here in front to catch it before it reaches the floor. Yeah. Let me really quickly get to the beginning of this presentation. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is ODC, and specifically ODC architecture. It's quite, I think, a challenging thing because architecture is, per definition, about trade-offs. Like, it's never, this is the best thing to do in all scenarios. It's always, this is the best, but it will have these costs, and sometimes this is the best, so let's be nuanced about it, right? So what I'm going to do today is tackle two trade-offs where sometimes one thing is the best to do and sometimes the other thing is the best. The first of the two trade-offs that we're going to be talking about is, I swapped the order. The last of the two trade-offs that we're going to be talking about is when do we want to give teams autonomy in deploying things and basically releasing functionality, but also considering when they want to adopt the functionality that has been released to them, and when do we want to ensure that everybody is on the latest version and basically force a big go live all in one go, and how do we deal with that from an application and library side of things. But the thing that we're going to be talking about first is to split or not to split, or basically domains. Where are the boundaries? How do we split up our architecture into a good set of applications that work well in ODC? And I'm going to do that from the point of view where we assume that you already have something done in O11, because realistically speaking, many people here have already done something in O11 and might have an architecture with some O11 application. So it's a good starting point, I think. Before we dive into the to split or not to split question, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know about domain-driven development for the next segment, not for live, but like for the next segment of this presentation, which is, we all started back in the first time that we did basically an OutSystems project or something with a nicely basically almost monolithic approach towards applications. We started off small, having everything together neatly connected. And then as our systems grow, typically what we see is we split things out more carefully, put things into modules, and slowly start to think, okay, well, maybe we should create sort of domains, but they're still tightly coupled, making sure that things are organized out. And then typically at the end of a architecture evolution, what we see is people are working more in loosely coupled architectures with basically small systems which have more monolithic properties, but they're so tiny basically that we can connect them quite easily together and swap elements out together because they're in a loosely coupled ecosystem. Let's call it an ecosystem of functionalities. This evolution typically happens because what we see as our systems grow is that the need for a good architecture approach where we can easily swap elements out and be more agile can. I see that there's a problem.
Yeah, one tiny thing is that we have this on your screen, so you can click hide and then.
Yeah, I can hide it and not flip over my laptop. Okay,
Yes.
cool. That was my first test, and this is going to be the entertainment element of tonight. We're going to count. You place your bets now. How long the laptop survives. Anyway, the whole point about making this move, right, is that when we start off building applications or when we start small, typically what we want to do is we want to build fast. We want to see results fast, and we can do that more easily in a basically monolithic situation because everything is in the same context, and that makes things much faster in terms of development. But as we are growing over time, we see a need to be able to change the system more frequently and in more radical ways. And then we see a need for additional loosely coupled basically points of disconnection so that if we need to, we can actually swap something out and can make changes much more easily because it's a much smaller scope that we need to take into account. So we don't need to think of everything in the system, but just the things that are inside this little block of functionality, right? So this is how architectures typically evolve. And that is because both of these things are useful. We tend to learn that monoliths are bad and that loosely coupled is great, but that is not actually the reality of life, right? So monoliths, especially if you take a good architectural approach within them, actually have some benefits. They have a great in-process communication, and they have all transactions inside the same process, which makes you basically have to do a lot less admin. Because when you disconnect something, you need to be more explicit about the communication, while if everything is together, you can easily sort of rely on the fact that everything is in the same context to handle things like transaction integrity and things like that. Now, loosely coupled architectures allow you to do more independent deployments because things are much less connected. So you have less circular references and stuff like that that would break your deployments because you have loosely coupling in between. And they allow you also to build, test, and publish on your own life cycle more independently and allow you to be more agile with larger systems. Then, of course, the question is, where do we decouple things? So where do we basically split up our big monolith into nice little monoliths that behave nicely together in loosely coupled architecture? And the answer is we use something that we call a domain. Now, a domain is a bit of a wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey type of concept, right?
Can you repeat that?
A wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey concept. Which is to say, I'm not going to give you a perfect definition of a domain. Please don't ask me to. I will not be able to. And I think if you ask a million architects, you will get a million slightly different answers, right? But what it does have some characteristics that we can see and can focus on. So first, we can have a well-defined business concept. So here we have things that together sort of fit together in the same bounded context. And I asked Arjan, what is a bounded context? How do I explain that? And the answer is things that relate more to each other than to the other things. So here we have basically a customer, and the address, postal code, and credit card of the customer relate more to the customer than that they relate, for instance, to the price of the product, right? So far, we're all in agreement. So that is the first thing. We have a well-defined business context, and things are existing in their own little bounded context. And then the third thing is it's not just about the specific business elements itself. It's also just about organization. Like who is working on a specific element. If I have a team working on this is probably my business domain, because that is much easier than having multiple teams like interacting and trying to fight with each other. If I have one sponsor, so like on the top, there's only one guy who owns this, probably is a business domain, right? So that is how we can sort of go about and figure out our business domains. Now, that's all you needed to know, and now it's time for the exam. Yes, grab your pen pen and paper, or in this case, your mobile phone. You are going to need your mobile phone, so sorry about that. But I'm going, as I said, domain-driven architecture is a little bit wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. So what we're going to do to get it to understood, to basically figure out our domains, is we're going to give you an example. I'm going to show you an O11 architecture, and I'm going to talk you through it. And then I'm going to show you 3 options of how you could split that into domains. And then you are all going to pick the right option, and then we're going to talk through it. That's basically the approach. So we have here a insurance customer. The insurance customer has a broker portal and a client or customer portal, right? And then they have 3 insurance lines. So we have cars, we have health, and we have multi-risk. So these are the 3 types of things basically they're selling. These are the people who own the different topics. And these are the 2 interfaces through which they sell these services and insurances. Right? Everybody on board with the beautiful business case that we have? Okay, we can look a little bit closer. In the client side, we have both a website and a mobile app. And because we have a mobile app, we have mobile plugins involved, of course, to support that. And then we have also here in the multi-risk an external legacy calculation engine that we need to connect to. So we have a little bit element for that. And we have an integration here to the car plates API so that we can get like information that we need for our insurance, like the make and model of the car, for instance. So this is our beautiful system. Yes.
Yeah, I think we're back. Sorry, guys.
Can everybody hear me again? Yes, I know you guys could hear me all along. I was asking the people at home.
They're muted.
Yes.
It's back.
Awesome.
All right. So I'm going to assume that they basically got the gist of me explaining that we are doing the split off thing and that how this O11 element looks. So the first option that you can vote for in the future is we're just going to split it all per vertical line, right? So we have here a broker portal, that is a thing. We have the customers, we have the cars, we have the health, and we have the multi-risk. A very simple approach. We're just putting a box around every vertical and we're done. Could be option 1. It does definitely already achieve some of the goals that we've set out. Option 2. We do basically the same thing for the broker portal, so that's going to live in its own little thing, but then things get more complex in the rest. So we have a client and a web mobile, and both of them get their own domains. Then we have a set of shared components at the bottom, and the UI stuff is sitting on the top. So that's option 2. So that's option 2. If you like this, vote for option 2. Then we have option 3, which is complicated in a different way. So we have the broker portal still of its own. Health is also just a completely vertical here. But in multi-risk, auto, and the client side, so the places where we also have some technical service underneath, we're splitting out the technical services underneath to be the basically separate elements, separate domains in this system. So that is option 3. So these are the 3 options that you can vote for. And now I'm going to tell you how to vote. And this is once again very exciting and scary. All right, so welcome to my quiz. Please scan the QR code. And that also should work for the people who are not physically with us, but here with us in spirit.
My grandma.
All right, I see a lot of people getting up and trying to join. I see a lot of people putting up already thumbs. Very nice. I appreciate that. That shows me that people are able to enter the system. So that makes me feel happy. All right. I'm somehow assuming that this number means how many people are in there, but potentially it means that somebody's just pressing very quickly on the.
It's me. Oh, I thought it was me.
It's still counting. We're
Just
at
flooding the
43.
thing.
Yeah.
And now it will break, you know.
No, I think the number will stay the same.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think so.
assuming that
Yeah.
this number means how many people
But
join.
maybe the virtual stance is.
Yeah, because like we did it like for
was
lots of
like-
times at the average for us.
Doing a DDoS attack over here, but
All right, I'm gonna give it about 10 more seconds, and then we're just going to move forward.
What was the first option?
Yes, what was the first option? Very good. Let's review our options. So the first option was just everything in its own vertical domain. The second option was we have our client and mobile applications split off, so they're both different domains, and all of the technical components are together in a shared sort of technical domain. And then the third option is we have the broker in its own domain, we have some other things in their own domain, and then for the places where we have technical elements, they are separated in their own domain, but they're not all shared together into one big technical domain. And I think with that, we have everybody in the system who's going to join, because I'm going to now switch to the option. If everything is right, you should be able to actually vote through the phone on it. And we see people already pointing their vote. I do want to say, if your opinion is different from the crowd, do feel free to actually express it, because it's anonymous. So I will not be able to point you out. Feel comfortable with that. All right, I think everybody has voted. So to answer the question, actually the majority in this case is right. The reason why we split it up in technical domains, I think
Nu kun je volgens mij, denk ik.
Wat?
Die rood blinkt dan, hij mag overal in, er is geen USB aansluiten, dus gewoon woordjes.
I was taking a phone call.
Dus als hij rood is, dan laat hij het. Hij laat op. Ja, perfect, dankjewel. Yo.
Well, that was an interesting interruption, and I do appreciate it.
Yeah, he's muted now.
Yeah.
Kick him off.
Let me quickly
He's
show
not paying
you.
attention.
Let me quickly show you option 3 again. So this is what most of you voted for, and that's because most of you are correct. I cannot really explain to you why this is the best solution, right? But we can look at some things and say, okay, that feels quite right to us. So in principle, everything was already nicely organized in vertical domains that suit together in sort of a business context, right? So that is already something that we like. But that was also the case in the first option that we were looking at. However, we would like to have some of the technical elements to be separated from the business domains that they are being used in. Because, for instance, the mobile plugins could be useful in other domains as well. So we don't want them to be directly connected into the business domain where we're using them. And then we don't want to put all of these 3 different elements together into one big box, because if we do that, we basically tie them all very much together, which also makes us less flexible in going to production. So we would prefer to have them in their own technical context. So that is domain-driven development. And does this answer the ODC question? Not completely, right? Because then you want to ask, so what does that look like in an ODC architecture? And that answer is like this. So what we have here is we have, once again, our client mobile application. It's here off in its own corner together with the mobile plugins. And if we add the boxes around it, you see that this is all sort of tied together into the picture. Then we have here the broker portal in its own little hub. We have the client web in its own hub together with the health element. But for other things, it's more complex. So we have here, for instance, the car with the connector, and we have the multi-risk with its calculation engine together, sort of sitting as a business domain, but these are technical components that sort of exist separately. And then we have here also a front-end team that is providing web capabilities that can support the different web portals. So then we can actually use that into our styling of our applications. regardless of which business domain we are in. And here we have some of the technical services that we're basically using to support the different lines, and they also have their own teams. Now, once again, timey-wimey, wobbly hobbly. Now I'm doing something different. That was not the same one. I failed, I'm sorry. But basically, it is not an exact science. It's an art. Architecture it is. But we can look at some exact principles if we're going a little bit deeper. So now we're going to play a game about applications and libraries. So once again, I'm going to give you a crash course. That's just enough for you to be able to survive the next segment of our competition. So first of all, applications. What are applications in ODC? They basically have their own runtime, their own container in which they are able to have screens, they're able to have data, and they're able to have all kinds of other things that require runtime. So like a REST API endpoint and things like that. They also are mainly meant to be dealing with business concepts. So things in here should be meaningful to some person, typically. Not always, because all rules have exceptions, but typically there's a meaningful concept in the data, for instance, that you're storing in there. And they are loosely coupled from each other. So, and one application and the second application are connected with each other through service actions and REST APIs and other loosely coupled elements, but they cannot directly reuse each other's elements. They to basically hold interfaces, expose services, expose or save data, use asynchronous processing, things like that, throw events. They have these elements that you're familiar with. So we have in the processes side timers and a new element which is called events. In interface we have screens and external sites, and we do have blocks, but you cannot expose them for reuse to other applications because loosely coupled, right? We have the JavaScript options, themes, that type of thing. We have logic, so we have the service actions, REST APIs to expose things to other people, and server actions, client actions to expose within the application itself, once again, not to the other applications. And of course, exceptions within the application itself, not to the other applications. Then for data, we have entities and client variables specifically to be used within the application, but could also be exposed to other applications. And then we have these elements that are specifically for within that application context. The way that we put them into production is we basically create a container. So we publish, it becomes a container on development. And then if we put them into production, we can just put it into production. If we bring if we are reusing elements from another application that we want to use in production, we need to make sure that that application is also in production, because otherwise we're going to get confusing results. What is a library? A library is something that does not have its own context. It's specifically designed to be reused within applications. It's basically where we build things that are business agnostic. So they're for technical elements, for instance, so your style sheet and your, I don't know, your weblogs that don't have any data in it, for instance. Those things are put into a library. And these elements are exposed to be strongly coupled within the application. So that means that if something changes in that library, it directly impacts the application when it updates to that version. But when it updates to that version is important, because a library you can actually choose to release, and then the person who is consuming it can choose to consume it, to consume the new version. So you don't have to upgrade with the system. So it is strongly coupled, but it gives more freedom to the person who's consuming it in when it gets upgraded. And basically what you see here is we have a lot of business agnostic elements in there, for instance, like themes and logic and things like that. So elements that you see in libraries are slightly different from those in applications. Basically, the blocks and the themes, for instance, are elements that are used within the application itself. So you might build a theme that can then be applied to the application, or you might build a weblog but it cannot contain the data. The data needs to be added from the application. If you're setting a setting in the library, then the value it actually gets from the application that's using the library, right? So the library itself has no identity. It's just being used for things that do have an identity and a context and an understanding of what needs to be happening. It's a technical enabler, basically. So how do we deploy a library? We put it inside an application. We generate the container of that application, and then we deploy that application to production. And that's how a library gets to production. A library cannot go to production on its own. It does not exist on its own. And of course, then we need to apply values to these different elements. For instance, if we're consuming a REST API, we might want to set a new REST point in production. And you can do that through the portal, the developer portal. If you do it on a library, it gets applied in the application that consumes the library, right? All of this, I think, is quite, and for integrations, the same thing. So if you're having an external API that you're consuming in the library, the external URI, the API endpoint will get set on the application that's consuming the library.
If you are using the same library for multiple applications, do you have to package the library with every application and then put it on production? Or
yes.
Just one time?
And you would have to set also the integration values and the values for the settings on each of the applications. This is deliberate because in principle, that makes it very business agnostic, right? Because then I could put different endpoints for different applications or different settings for different applications. All right, so that is enough of me talking. Let's go and play a game again. I'm going to give you 2 rules to keep in mind for this game. The first one is library. In a library, when a library releases, everybody can upgrade to that version on their own pace. So that's useful and something to keep in mind. And it's only business agnostic things that we should be putting in libraries. Once again, for all of my rules, just imagine there's exceptions everywhere, right? It's not that black and white. And then finally, it does not have its own runtime context. So these are the 3 things to remember about libraries. And then for applications, it's the other way around. So when an application releases something, everybody just needs to deal with it. We are going to new service action version. Everybody else is going to go to this new service action version, and they're just going to have to deal with it. My elements are business aware. So if I'm in an application, I do know about the business context where I'm in. And then the third one is, it does have...
Great the charger.
Does anyone have a USB-C charger?
Yes. Oh, I have one in my bag right there. So, oh yeah, er ligt er daar.
Deze kan niet in de...
Misschien.
Ja, maar hij moet eerst... Oh, zo. Ja.
All right, so the third rule for applications is they run in their own context. So they do actually have a place where their API endpoint can live. No, it's niet deze laptop.
But it's charging.
Good. All right, so these are 3 rules. Keep them in mind. Let's look at our first dilemma. So, sharing a theme and patterns across several applications. Where should that live? Grab your mobile phone again. Let's see if everybody's been paying attention. Okay. I do think I did not crash it, so I'm proud of myself for that. Take the small wins. All right, so the first question. Are themes, patterns, and styling best built in an application or a library? And do keep in mind, you also have the option, why not both? Because sometimes the answer is, why not both? But in this case, why not both is not necessarily the right answer. I was just pointing out that that could be an option. Okay, I see that people have voted, and the answer is indeed correct. It is in a library. So let's look at some examples of themes and styling in libraries. Because I did not tell you this, but I'm tricking you into also learning other things than just if it's a library or an application. Because it would be boring if it's just a library and an application. So first things first, the way that we are doing style sheets and themes in ODC is basically by putting them in themes and patterns in libraries and then consuming them in each application. The benefit of this is that because we now are able to release, choose when we want to go to the next version, each of the application can upgrade to the latest version of the styling at the moment that this makes sense for them. For people who have ever dealt with OutSystems UI upgrades that they weren't completely ready for and worked the weekend, this is amazing, right? This is work-life balance for the developer. That's what this is right here. And it's also very important because it gives us full control on the way that our UX and UI is looking. And for all applications, it's not equally important. Say we have both a mobile application and a web application, just like we had in the example before with the client portal. Then we have different themes and patterns for both of those applications. But they can use the same base theme. And we would recommend doing that because that reduces the amount of work that you're doing. So this is also a library. So this is a library for the base theme, and it's being used by those two other libraries to specialize into specific application types. That was themes and styling. Now let's look at reusable blocks that contain data. Ooh, that's a pickle. That's a very difficult one. Let's see how we are doing with that question. Should that be an application or a library? Okay, there. We already have some people who are voting. Very good. I do like that this one is a more split situation. Very good, because this one is a deliberately confusing question to ask. Because at first glance, the answer is one thing, but then later the answer is another thing. And maybe the answer is actually, why not both? Who knows? All right, so I think about everyone has approximately voted, so let's go and look at the answer. The answer that nope. I did not click the right button. That's the thing. I was so much trying not to break the whole delicate balance that I have going here that I accidentally did not click the right button. Okay, so the answer is why not both? And I think that that's surprising for many of you because not everybody voted for that option. The answer is why not both? Because both of the elements that we need are in there. So if we're thinking about a block that contains data, the block element is basically a reusable piece of UI, which could be considered a business agnostic element that you want to share through libraries, because if you change some elements in there, it's not necessarily something that everybody needs to be forced to be on the latest version with. So in principle, that sounds very nice. Also, blocks cannot be shared from an application point of view, so we kind of need to put it in a library. But then if we think about the data sharing part, we cannot actually put the data of that block in the library unless it's static data, right? We can put it in a static entity. But most of the time we are thinking more about business data, which if we're talking business data, that's probably business aware, right? So that's also not business agnostic. So then what we wind up with is we're saying we're trying to combine the best of both options. So we use the block part through a library, and we're using the service action to provide the data from an application side of view. Another example for in case that you do have static data, in that case, the library, people who answered it's a library, is actually correct. Because if it's all static data, for instance, if my menu items are not changing that frequently and we're building a menu block, I can build it in a static entity, and I can put it into the library block in a library, and I don't need the data to be dynamically put in from the application side. So that brings us to the third question that I have, integration service wrappers. We would like to integrate to an external system. We are wrapping this service, and we're trying to make sure that if the third party is changing the API in any way, we're not impacting the entire system. Do we put this in an app or a library? And for that, we're going to go to the next question. So do you prefer to put it in an app or library? I do like the way that things are moving around here. It does make me feel like people are engaged with the presentation. So I think I will use that in the future again, because it makes me feel like people are actually listening. Maybe they're just happily pressing buttons, and that's also fine, honestly. I already appreciate you guys for being here with me at like 10 to 8 on a Thursday night. All right, so what we are seeing here is that most people are voting library. And once again, the majority actually has it, because that is the correct answer. Because if we're, once again, applying the rules that we've set out for our little game before, using a library actually allows us to release the latest version of the API to everyone, but allows everybody to upgrade to that latest version on their own speed. So that is definitely a benefit. We can actually integrate to applications from the library layer, so there's no technical restrictions there. And integration is basically a technical service, so it's pretty business agnostic. So the library is a great place for us to put it. Of course, sometimes our integrations look a little bit more like this. So we have multiple systems where we can integrate to, and we have a little layer on top of it that is actually doing the mapping and the distribution, and that is also then a library. So libraries is the right answer for this one in this case. And I have a question.
I missed the trade-offs. So you mentioned that the architect is the right trade-offs, and now you're post of this is the right decision and this is the wrong decision to make. Zooming into this one, I would say, suppose that you want to have local caching in this integration, so you cannot use a library, you are forced to use an app, right?
If you are doing local caching, actually I removed those slides because I thought it was going to be a little bit too much in depth for the amount of time that I had. But yes, I had a slide on that, and that is indeed where the trade-off is. If you do want to do local caching, what you do is you build an entity in an application and a timer in an application to get the information, but you would still use the library in to do the consumption of the integration, basically. So you would have the application doing the integration through the library.
What would be the benefit of it? Why not doing everything in the app?
The benefit for that would be that in the case that you are, for instance, switching the systems to a different system, you have within the library a place to do the mapping and addressing, so that you don't have to change all of the applications above. And also you could use it in multiple places, because here you might be using this integration specifically for some caching in this application, but maybe somewhere else you just want to, I don't know, write or read a small amount of data always fresh, and then you can use the same integration service for that. But there's scenarios probably where you would not go through the extra effort of putting the library in between. Because you're right, architecture is about trade-offs, and there's not always a right or wrong answer with that. All right. So this is my last one where we're voting for application or library, and that is sharing data between systems. So we have multiple systems in OutSystems itself, so in ODC itself, that are using a specific source of data. How do we share that between the different applications, for instance, where we're utilizing that data?
You mean like external systems?
No, I mean like systems within ODC. I tried to change the words a little bit to make the answer less obvious.
Yeah.
But I think everybody is very smart here, so probably everybody's caught on. So let's move to the next, I don't know how to move. Let's move on to the next question. Is business data best built in an application or a library? And I can see everybody being very, very much in favor of the application, because everybody's been paying attention. The application is the only place where we can save the business data. So naturally, we need to put it into the application. But the big question is, how do we share the data between the applications? Because before we said, if we make a change in an application, that means that everybody else is immediately confronted with this change of the data. And that sometimes cannot be to the benefit of the system. You might want people to be able to take some time to adapt to these changes. So how do we do it? And the answer, yes. The answer to that is indeed you take different approaches for different questions. So if we have pretty static data, we can actually reuse the read action basically on the application. So we can just share the data and we can look at it. And we can do that because it doesn't change frequently enough for us to take any safeguards for that. But there's also scenarios where some elements are going to be changing, and it's going to be actually affecting all of these applications that are making use of that data. Which then, if it's changing quite frequently, means that every time that this application updates, everybody else needs to update, and everybody needs to go to production approximately at the same time. That sounds inconvenient. So sometimes what we do instead is we put an API on top of it, or in this case, a service action, right? Where we are putting an interface on top of it, which is a structure that is not the data base itself, right? It's actually a structure that is separate, that allows us to basically do some mapping and absorb some of those changes in the system. So that concluded, let's play, should it be an app or should it be a library? And that leaves me exactly 4 minutes to talk about one thing that I thought was interesting to mention. With ODC, we have some different architectural challenges. And this is one that we haven't had before, at least not within the ODC landscape itself. We have customers who have built event-driven systems, of course, but then you have the events outside of ODC. With event-driven architecture inside ODC, we actually need to deal with new challenges, because it is actually a very powerful capability that you have. It allows you to really reduce the sort of cognitive load that it takes for you to build complex systems, because basically everybody's either working towards creating an event or dealing with the fact that an event took place, which really breaks everything up in nice little tiny little bits. And you set up this very nice system of dominoes. But you set up this nice system of dominoes and everybody understands exactly this tiny little bit of it. And then if one domino doesn't topple over when you push the whole system and things work, actually figuring out why it didn't work can be quite complicated. So this was sort of my sort of interesting consideration on event-driven architectures, is there's actually a lot of best practices around building them in a way that it makes sense and that it's robust and that it keeps working. Because basically you need to be aware that the events themselves also don't have each other's context. So all of the time we're basically making sure that everybody else, if I'm trying to write something into the database but it didn't work, I need to let everybody know, because then everybody can turn back their logic. If I'm doing something based on database changes, but I'm not committing that data to the database before I'm starting to send out the events, I might have a disconnect between the data in the database and the events that we're trying to handle if it gets aborted before I'm committing the transaction, right? So these are just some very specific details. But what I'm trying to say is, with event-driven architectures, you need to make sure that you implement even more carefully in terms of architecture, because a lot of the complexity should be coming up front, and then the developers actually have a much easier time building the parts because they're broken up into nice little manageable pieces. But we do need to be aware that nobody else is aware of what's happening into our tiny little context with the event-driven architectures. So I think that that is a fun thing to play with, and you should probably try and build something yourself and figure out how difficult it is to debug if you didn't do it the right way, because I learned a ton from doing that. So try that out, it's fun. On the flip side, the data mashup that we just saw actually should be reducing some of the complexities in terms of architecture, because that allows you to bring different data sources together in a quite performant way without having to build complicated architectural practices for caching and things like that. So that is removing some of the architectural load. So in general, one of the things that I want to observe is, I think that what I gave now was a very short overview kind of presentation of architecture in ODC. But as new features are rolling out with ODC, this presentation is going to be outdated very quickly. And we all need to stay sort of vigilant about the new features coming out and how we can implement it within architectures. and what the costs and benefits of specific implementation methods are. And with that, I have exactly finished on time.
It's still standing, your laptop.
And with a standing laptop. So thank you, that was amazing.
Great. Let me look.
Are there any questions?
Yes, we have one online question. Trigger event is like a process in O11. That's a question mark behind it. And then afterwards, one event can be used in the own app and continue asynchronously.
Yes. So a trigger event is not a replacement for BPT. We have actually something coming out that is called BPM that allows you to tackle like workflows and things like that. Trigger events is really meant to do asynchronous processing of data, logic, and setting up more dynamic systems. It can definitely be used for things that BPT is also used for, so more dynamic case managed type of things. So I understand where the question is coming from because I think that's accurate. But it's also, for instance, meant for like high load processing elements. The BPM capability that we're launching will be using events as well in the system to be interacting with the rest of the system as well. So it definitely has overlap. And yes, you can handle both the events inside the application and asynchronously. And if you handle it in your own application, it's still asynchronous, but you can also use it inside the other application. So multiple people can have a handler on the same event. Fire that all of the online questions?
No, there's one additional.
Okay. Do we do one from here first, or?
Yeah, if someone
Is there
has
one?
a question.
I think there is.
Yes.
All right.
So just on the event, is it the same as when you have a weblog and you have an event there, you trigger it and you can use it to pass data to the consumers? Is it a bit like that?
It has similar characteristics, but what I'm talking about is the server events that we've launched. Basically the system events. And the way that they work is basically you can create an event in the processes tab, so underneath, for instance, the timers, and then anywhere in the application you can throw that event if you want to, and then anybody else who wants to do something with the information from that event, for instance, an order was created, or this person has moved houses or whatever, right, can actually put a handler on that specific event and then deal with that, for instance, with regards to their own data or within their own system.
So similar, but much more versatile.
Yeah, much more versatile, and hopefully a good solution both to large batch processing questions that you might have, because you can quickly parallelize a lot of processing, and also, for instance, for dynamic workflow management, putting tasks into boxes and things like that, orchestrating across different applications. There's a lot of things that you can do with it. It's actually very fun, and I recommend looking into it. So the online question?
Yeah.
Online question.
It's an extension on this one. It's how scalable are events? What's the limit in event parallel processing? Is there a limit?
I think I had it on the slide, but I did not really mention it. So basically, we have maximum of 100 threads for an event in a specific application. So if we have multiple events, that is multiple per, they share sort of the 100 threads, right? And if you are so we have guaranteed the delivery of the event. So in the end, it will arrive once and exactly once. But that does not necessarily mean that it's arriving in the order in which you send them out, because sometimes an event handler might be busy, and then we engage this backup policy where we first wait 2 minutes, then 4 minutes, etc. So things can arrive in different orders. Was that an answer to the question you just read, or did I just? Okay. Yes. And I thought we had one more question here. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering, you presented one of the first slides was the architecture evolution from the monolith to a loosely coupled system. And I was wondering, if you look into the features that ODC makes available, how well is ODC supporting that evolution?
It does support more a system where it supports all of those phases as well, but it does it in a different way than we did in O11. So in O11, you can basically build your applications interconnectedly, but it still feels like they are slightly sort of separated out. In ODC, we don't really allow that stage. So what you see is you basically build everything inside one application, and that application grows and grows and grows. And at some point, you will have to separate that out and move into separate applications. Although you can put some things into libraries and stuff, so that will allow sort of the transition a little bit easier, but it will not have as much space for that part in the middle. We're basically trying to force people to commit earlier to decoupling the systems, because we see in the long run that will help them a lot with the agility, because right now we see that often that decision gets made too late sort of in the evolutionary process, which then puts people into a position where they have a pretty large system that feels still very tightly coupled, and anyone who's tried to put 50 different applications into production at the same time because you cannot deploy any of the applications without deploying all of the rest knows that that can be quite an annoying situation to be in. So we're trying to force people to make that switch earlier in the process.
There's some logging around the events we're doing.
Yes, there's some logging around events triggering. So you can see the events that are triggered, and you can see for the handlers also the ID, for instance, of the event that triggered the handler, so that you can trace back sort of how things change around. It's absolutely a minimum requirement for working with events. Otherwise, you would go completely insane. It's really hard to debug things if you don't have that.
What happens after 10 failed retry attempts?
Yes, that is a really good question. I don't know. But Arjan, do you know what happens after 10 retry attempts?
10 failed retry attempts.
It will retry putting it on the bus.
Yeah.
And when there's space, that will be put in the bus. If not, it will retry until it does. Basically.
So there's no maximum retry attempts, basically.
No.
Okay.
Oh, well, I think it's time limit, like 20 minutes, something like that.
And what happens then?
Then it will give an exception. Then you have to handle the exception.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
That's why it's good to have Arjan in the room with you.
Yeah, or we can just try it out.
Yeah, you definitely should, by the way.
Yeah.
This is the type of thing that you should go a little bit chaos monkey on and see if you can break it.
Yep.
Because that's the only way to really get the feeling for the technology. Are there any questions in the chat? Just to make sure.
No new questions.
Okay. Perfect. Are there any questions in the room?
Yeah, the question with also working in ODC now for working in O11, and where in O11 you have all the different modules, which also makes that your application doesn't grow too much. But I'm already noticing that when the application increases, that it also the publishing time increases, and also I'm a little bit wary because I heard for O11 that applications sometimes didn't compile anymore.
Yes.
I'm not there yet, but I'm worrying are there any noticeable things that you say okay, then you really need to split your application.
So this is for O11 specifically,
For ODC.
right? Oh, for ODC.
Yeah.
Well, just to quickly address in O11, if this happens in O11, typically what you see is, for instance, that you put too many resources as well. So documents or things in that module as well. So in general, a best practice is not to do that, but keep it sort of separated out. And in ODC, you could also have a library for your resources, right? So that way you could already sort of reduce the impact for that. Within ODC, when you should split it, in general, we are aiming to not have it be a problem that your application grows too big if you stay logically within a business domain. So things that we do for that is, for instance, if we send in a new version of the code, we don't send in the entire thing, but just the things that change, right? So we're trying to sort of reduce the amount of data that is going back and forth. Even so, I imagine, because this is the case for almost all things, that the can be situations in which you break it anyway, right? In which it becomes too big to handle. And that would be a good moment to think that you maybe should split it out. But preferably, you would have thought that a little bit before, because things that you would have seen before you got to that point is typically that you are mixing different business concepts together, or that you are having multiple teams working on the same application, which might not be a best practice, or that you're seeing that it is becoming so big that multiple business sponsors are actually concerning themselves with that specific application, and you're seeing fighting between people high up in the organization trying to figure out what should be happening with the application. In those cases, definitely split up the application. Everybody should have their own baby, no fighting.
Yeah, we have to do that during the hackathon when we're working with 5 people on the same application.
Yeah.
We broke the speed.
Oh, but so here's the thing. That you should not, with ODC should not be experiencing that in the same way. Because typically when we're having 5 people working together and that breaks the process, that is because we're having trouble with the publish button basically being able to publish, because we have one publish hand surface basically on the entire system in O11. In ODC, it actually scales up. So I have done ODC Open Office Days where people play with ODC together, and 50 people are publishing at the same time, and it's not a problem because everybody just gets their own publish surface handling. So then it's not really the size of the application that breaks it, but more the fact that everybody's at the same time trying to use the same part of the system.
When is ODC going to be available for everyone?
When is it? Well, it is available for everyone who's willing to pay. No, sorry, that is a terrible answer. I'm assuming you mean personal environments, right? Yeah. I do not know when we will have personal environments. I keep asking this internally as well. To just give you a personal example, I'm building an application for my Only War campaign, and I'm building it on O11 because I have a PE there, and I think that's sad. Like, I want everybody to be able to build ODC applications for free. But my understanding is that this is something that we are thinking about on the background, but we haven't made the decision to make that available or have a timeline for that. So I'm sorry, that is not a very satisfying answer, and I agree with you.
I've got one online question.
Oh, good.
Jones Silva, I think I say his name correctly, I'm not sure. In ODC, is it better to create a front and back end in the same application or separate it into 2 applications?
That's an excellent question. I think in general, in ODC, I still expect to see a lot of core services applications as well. So those are applications where we have the data and a back office capability on top of that data, but not necessarily an interface. Examples are, for instance, if we have a web and a mobile front end, like we had before in our architecture picture, we are going to need to have a core services application to basically manage the data for both of those interfaces. So I think typically I would expect to have a separation between the back office and the front office, but I can imagine scenarios where it wouldn't be necessary, and I don't think you need to separate it out just because, right? So if it is feasible for you to have them both in the same application, I think that should be an acceptable practice.
Okay, I've answered live.
One more question.
Okay.
With respect to this one. What was the reason? So you can combine libraries into applications.
Mm-hmm.
So you build the container and then you deploy the container. What was the reason not to allow for entities to be defined in libraries? There's a specific reason. Because
a library does not have its own runtime, so it doesn't have anywhere to store the data. So it cannot store data. So it needs to have an application you need to have an application with its own sort of runtime to actually be able to store the data. So it's not possible to put it in a library just because of a technical limitation in that sense. I see that Kilian has a different opinion. So,
well, I don't know. I was just thinking about it. You would get clones, I would assume.
Yes, so that's
if you were to define an entity in a library, it would clone itself in every usage of that library. So that was my train of thought. I was like, well, I think technically you could do it. The question is how usable would it be? But also there, you get back to your architecture answer. Like there might be cases where it would have been useful. So for me, it's more I think a decision by OutSystems than like technically it's not possible.
Yes, you're right. So it's technically not possible for us to have one data table if we have a library that is being reused across different applications. I do agree with you, it would be possible to have multiple, like every time that you open the library, you would basically create a data table. But I guess in that sense, we have decided not to do that.
I think you might have sort of issue with your data because your library is included in your app.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have a new version of your library, and you have your data in your library, then I think your data might be overwritten as is gone.
But I guess it's in terms of the definition. So in this way, you are forced to implement. So as a developer within the app, you are forced to put everything into it. So whenever you open developer the IDE,
mm-hmm.
you are forced to see all these things, the complexity of the whole. Whereas in O11, you can split it up in modules, and you are only forced to see part of it. And I don't see a reason, also not a technical reason, of why not split it, allow it to split up the definition of the entities into multiple libraries, whatever
mm-hmm.
modules. And then when putting everything together, then of course you will have indeed different clones if you reuse that library in different applications. But I don't see, I guess from the developer perspective, it complicates life if you bump into very big applications.
You can make separate data applications to deliver the data to every part you want. It's sort of a library, but it's called an application.
Yeah, but then you are forced to use service actions too.
Yeah. No. You're not forced. You can use the entities because they're loosely coupled, but I would advise to use service actions.
And then there's also a point where I think says in your presentation about the different approaches to the sharing data, right? So you can do the direct data access, exposed as an entity, as a public entity, produced in other applications. That's an option. The other option is indeed have a service action, but that depends a bit on the nature of the data that you share. Was that in slides?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I also think that the reason why we're putting the data in the applications rather than in the libraries is that we're thinking of the libraries as a business agnostic place. Yeah. And a lot of the data that we have in our systems is not business agnostic. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not possible to have a technical only entity, but it is very rare. So it's probably not the use case that we designed the system for as well. I think people probably want snacks.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it out there.
Well, not necessarily, but
yeah.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That's...
Yes, I'm not going to break it yet. I'm just going to take
I would say thank you to everyone.